Part 1, The Whisper of Shadows. Commander Eloan Voss stood at the edge of the desolate colony, her heart pounding in her chest. The once thriving settlement had been reduced to a graveyard of twisted metal and crumbling structures. Reports had filtered through the Galactic Council about strange occurrences in this sector, rumors that humans were somehow involved. As she surveyed the scene through the visor of her helmet, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone. "Commander," came the voice of Lieutenant Yarrick Tull over the comms. "I've detected unusual energy signatures in Sector 7. It might be worth investigating." Voss nodded, though Tull couldn't see her through his visor. "Copy that, Lieutenant. Keep your guard up and report any anomalies." The team moved cautiously through the debris-strewn streets, their boots crunching against shattered glass and twisted metal. Each member was trained to handle threats from various alien species but had never encountered anything like what they were facing now. The air was thick with tension as they approached what appeared to be an old marketplace, its stalls long abandoned, yet something felt eerily alive in its shadows. "Stay alert," Voss ordered as they entered the market square. The flickering lights above cast ominous shadows that danced across their path. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." As they advanced deeper into the square, Tull activated his scanner. The device emitted a low hum as it swept across the area. Suddenly, it beeped rapidly, indicating multiple heat signatures nearby. "Commander, there are several life forms ahead," Tull exclaimed, his voice laced with urgency. "How many?" Voss asked sharply. "At least 5, no 6, he replied, his eyes wide behind his visor. Voss motioned for her team to spread out slightly but remain within earshot. They had trained for countless scenarios but had never prepared for this, an encounter with humans rumored to be immune to assassination attempts by alien assassins like themselves. The team moved forward cautiously until they reached an old storage facility at the edge of the market square. The door was ajar, creaking ominously as they approached. Voss signaled for silence and drew her plasma rifle from its holster. "On my mark," she whispered. With a deep breath, she pushed open the door just enough to peer inside. The room was dimly lit but filled with discarded equipment and remnants of past lives, old tools and personal belongings scattered across the floor like forgotten memories. Suddenly, a noise echoed from within, a soft thud followed by hurried whispers. Voss's instincts kicked in, she motioned for her team to take cover behind nearby crates. "What do you see?" Tull whispered urgently from behind her. Voss strained her ears to listen closely. "I can't make out words, but it sounds like they're planning something." Before she could respond further, one of her team members, a burly soldier named Kellen, stepped forward too quickly, his foot catching on a loose piece of metal. He stumbled loudly into view. "Damn it!" Kellen cursed as he regained his balance. The whispers stopped instantly, silence enveloped them like a shroud. Voss's heart raced as she peered around the corner again. There were indeed figures inside, humans, clad in tattered clothing but bearing an unmistakable air of defiance. "Show yourselves," Voss commanded firmly. A figure stepped into view, a young man with tousled hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to glow even in the dim light. He raised his hands slowly in surrender but wore a smirk that suggested he was anything but intimidated. "You're late," he said casually, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Voss narrowed her eyes at him. "Late for what?" The human's smile widened as he leaned against a wall casually. "For your own funeral." Before Voss could react, chaos erupted around them as more figures emerged from hiding spots within the room. Humans armed with makeshift weapons sprang into action. Her team quickly took defensive positions as shots rang out from both sides. "Fall back," Voss shouted as she ducked behind cover, returning fire while assessing their options. The humans were surprisingly agile. They moved with an uncanny grace that made them difficult targets despite their apparent lack of advanced weaponry compared to Voss's team. It was clear they had been waiting for this moment, a chance to confront their would-be assassins directly. In the midst of gunfire and shouts, Voss caught sight of Tull struggling against two humans who had flanked him from behind. A quick glance revealed he was holding his own but needed assistance fast. "Kellen. Cover Tull," Voss ordered as she maneuvered around crates to provide support. Kellen nodded and shifted his aim toward Tull's attackers just as one human managed to wrestle Tull's weapon away from him. In that instant, Voss felt a surge of determination. These humans were not just victims, they were fighters willing to defend their lives against overwhelming odds. With renewed resolve, she charged forward into the fray, a plasma bolt whizzing past her shoulder as she engaged one of the attackers head-on. The clash was fierce, each side fought fiercely for survival amidst shouts and explosions echoing through the ruined colony. As chaos reigned around them, Commander Eloan Voss realized they were not just hunting prey, they had stumbled into a war zone where humanity's spirit burned brighter than any weapon could extinguish. And perhaps it was time for them all to learn what true resilience meant in this unforgiving universe. Part 2, The Hunt Begins. Lieutenant Yarrick Tull crouched low behind a rusted cargo container, his heart racing as he surveyed the chaos unfolding in the dimly lit storage area. The firefight had erupted suddenly, and now the air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt ozone and the sharp tang of adrenaline. He could hear the shouts of his comrades mingling with the defiant cries of the humans they were supposed to eliminate. "Stay focused, Yarrick." Commander Eloan Voss's voice crackled through his earpiece, pulling him from his daze. "We need to regroup and assess our situation." Tull nodded to himself, even though she couldn't see him. He took a deep breath to steady his nerves and peered around the edge of the container. The humans were agile, darting between shadows with an uncanny ability to evade their shots. It was as if they had a sixth sense for danger, and it unnerved him. "Commander, I think we need to fall back," he suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're outnumbered here." "Negative," Voss replied firmly. "We can't retreat until we find out what they're planning. We need intel." Tull's gaze flickered to a nearby door that had been partially blown off its hinges during the skirmish. It led deeper into the colony, where he suspected more surprises awaited them. The thought of venturing into unknown territory sent a shiver down his spine, but he knew he had no choice. "On my mark," Voss commanded again. "Cover me while I move to that door." With a quick nod, Tull adjusted his plasma rifle and prepared to provide cover fire as Voss made her move. She dashed from behind cover, her movements swift and calculated. Tull squeezed the trigger, sending bolts of energy toward a group of advancing humans. One fell, but two more took its place, determination etched on their faces. "Go!" Voss shouted as she reached the door. Tull's heart raced as he continued firing, trying to keep the humans at bay while Voss slipped inside the darkened corridor beyond. Just as he was about to follow her, a sharp pain shot through his shoulder. He had been hit. "Damn it," he cursed under his breath but forced himself to keep moving. He ducked behind another crate and pressed a hand against his wound, feeling warmth seep through his fingers. "Yarrick! Get in here!" Voss called urgently from inside. With gritted teeth and a surge of adrenaline, Tull sprinted toward the door and dove inside just as another plasma bolt whizzed past him, narrowly missing his head. He landed on the cold floor beside Voss, who immediately began assessing his injury. "Are you hit?" she asked sharply, her eyes scanning for threats. "Just a scratch," Tull lied through clenched teeth as he winced from the pain. "What's our next move?" Voss glanced around the dimly lit corridor before answering. "We need to find out what these humans are up to and why they're so well prepared for us." As they moved deeper into the corridor, Tull felt an unsettling sense of foreboding wash over him. The walls were lined with strange symbols and markings that seemed almost alive in the flickering light. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Commander," Tull whispered cautiously, "do you think they're expecting us?" Voss nodded slowly, her expression grave. "It seems likely. We've underestimated them before, we can't afford to do it again. The corridor opened up into a larger chamber filled with remnants of advanced technology. Screens flickered with static images of human faces and data streams that made no sense to Tull. In the center stood a large console surrounded by scattered equipment. "Look at this," Voss said as she approached the console, her fingers dancing over its surface. "This could be a control hub for their operations." Tull moved closer, peering at the screens displaying maps of their colony in various locations across different planets. "They're planning something big," he murmured. Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the chamber, red lights flashing ominously overhead. "Great," Voss muttered as she turned back toward Tull. "We've triggered their defenses." Without hesitation, she activated her communicator. "Team. We've been compromised. Fall back to extraction point Delta." Tull's heart sank at her words. They were trapped in enemy territory with no clear escape route. He glanced around frantically for an exit while Voss continued working on the console. "Commander. We need to move," he urged. "I'm trying," she snapped back as she tapped furiously at the controls. Just then, heavy footsteps echoed from behind them. A group of humans was approaching fast, weapons drawn and ready for combat. "Get ready!" Voss shouted as she grabbed her weapon and took cover behind a nearby crate. Tull followed suit just as several humans burst into the room, their expressions fierce and determined. They opened fire without hesitation. "Return fire!" Voss commanded as plasma bolts lit up the chamber in flashes of blue light. Tull squeezed off several shots in quick succession but felt a surge of panic rise within him as he realized how outmatched they were against these tenacious opponents. The humans fought with an intensity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. They moved like shadows through the chaos, dodging shots and retaliating with precision strikes that left Tull reeling. "Yarok! Focus!" Voss shouted again as she fired off another round at an advancing human who was trying to flank them. "I'm trying." Tull replied breathlessly as he ducked behind cover again just in time to avoid being hit. As they exchanged fire with their opponents, Tull noticed something strange. The humans weren't just fighting, they seemed to be communicating silently among themselves through gestures and glances. It was almost like they had rehearsed this encounter beforehand. "What are they doing?" Tull wondered aloud. "They're coordinating," Voss replied grimly as she reloaded her weapon. "They know how we operate." Just then, one of the humans broke away from the group and dashed toward them with surprising speed. Tull's instincts kicked in. He raised his rifle but hesitated. Something about this human felt different from the others. "Wait!" Voss shouted suddenly as she recognized who it was. A young man with tousled hair who had been part of their earlier skirmish in the marketplace. The human skidded to a halt before them, panting heavily but holding up his hands in surrender. "I'm not here to fight," he exclaimed urgently. "What do you want?" Voss demanded suspiciously, keeping her weapon trained on him. "I have information, important information about what's really going on here," he insisted breathlessly. Tull exchanged glances with Voss. Despite their situation, curiosity piqued within him. "What kind of information?" he asked cautiously. "The Syndicate is planning something much bigger than just hunting down individual humans," he explained quickly. "They believe we're weak because we're scattered, but we're not alone." Voss narrowed her eyes skeptically but lowered her weapon slightly. There was something about this human that intrigued her despite her better judgment. "What do you mean?" she pressed for details. The young man took a deep breath before continuing. "We have allies, other groups who are fighting back against the Syndicate's oppression across multiple worlds." Tull felt a surge of disbelief at what he was hearing. Could it be true? Were there more like this human? More who were willing to stand against their powerful enemies? "If you want us to believe you," Voss said firmly, "you'll need to show us proof." The human nodded vigorously but then glanced nervously toward where more footsteps echoed down the corridor, a reminder that time was running out for all of them. I can lead you to our base, he offered quickly. But you have to trust me. Voss hesitated for a moment before exchanging another look with Tull. There was no guarantee this human wasn't leading them into a trap, but staying here would likely mean certain death against overwhelming odds. All right, she said finally after weighing their options carefully. Lead us there, but if you try anything funny. I won't, he promised earnestly as he motioned for them to follow him deeper into the colony's labyrinthine passages. As they moved quickly through dimly lit corridors filled with debris and remnants of past battles fought long ago between humans and aliens alike, Tull couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling creeping up inside him. Was this truly an ally or just another player in an ever-expanding game? But one thing was clear, whatever lay ahead would change everything they thought they knew about humanity, and perhaps even about themselves. Part 3, The Unexpected Encounter. Dr. Lyra Cade adjusted her glasses as she peered at the screen in front of her, the glow illuminating her face in the dimly lit lab. The room was cluttered with data pads, alien artifacts, and various scientific equipment that hummed quietly. She had spent countless hours researching the peculiar resilience of humans, a species that had somehow managed to evade extermination despite the relentless efforts of the Syndicate. Her latest findings were startling. Humans possessed an innate adaptability that allowed them to survive in conditions that would obliterate most other species. This was not just a matter of physical endurance, it was a psychological trait as well. They were capable of forming alliances, strategizing under pressure, and most importantly, they had an uncanny ability to fight back against their oppressors. Dr. Cade, a voice called from the doorway, interrupting her thoughts. It was Commander Eloan Voss, flanked by Lieutenant Yarrick Tull. They looked weary but determined, their uniforms stained from their recent skirmish with humans in the colony. Commander Voss, Lieutenant Tull, Lyra greeted them, quickly clearing a space on her cluttered desk for them to sit. I've been expecting you. I assume you've encountered the humans? Voss nodded, her expression grave. We were ambushed. They fought like they knew we were coming. Tull leaned forward, his eyes wide with urgency. Dr. Cade, we need to understand why they're so resilient. What do you know? Lyra took a deep breath and gestured for them to sit down. I've been studying their biology and psychology for months now. What I've discovered is both fascinating and alarming. Voss crossed her arms, her brow furrowing in concentration. Go on. Humans have an extraordinary capacity for survival, Lyra explained, pulling up data on the screen behind her. Their bodies produce stress hormones that enhance their physical capabilities during crises, adrenaline, cortisol. They can push themselves beyond normal limits when threatened. Tull interjected, but how does that explain their ability to fight back against trained assassins? Lyra continued, it's not just physical, it's mental as well. Humans are incredibly resourceful and adaptable. They can improvise weapons from everyday objects and use their environment to their advantage. She paused for emphasis. They also have a strong sense of community and loyalty to one another, which can amplify their effectiveness in combat situations. Voss leaned back in her chair, absorbing this information. So you're saying they're not just surviving, they're thriving in conflict? Exactly, Lyra replied enthusiastically. And there's more. I believe they possess an instinctive understanding of tactics and strategy that allows them to outmaneuver even the most experienced operatives. Tull's eyes narrowed as he processed this information. If they're capable of this level of resistance, then what does that mean for us? For the Syndicate? It means we're facing an enemy unlike any other, Lyra said firmly. The Syndicate has underestimated them for too long. If we don't change our approach, if we don't understand what drives them, we will continue to lose operatives and resources. Voss nodded slowly, contemplating their next move. What do you suggest? We need to gather more intelligence on their operations, Lyra proposed. We need to understand how they communicate, how they organize themselves. She hesitated before adding, and we may need to consider negotiating with them instead of eliminating them. Negotiate? Tull echoed incredulously. You expect us to sit down and talk with them after everything that's happened? Yes, Lyra replied with conviction. If we can establish some form of communication, we might find common ground, perhaps even allies against the Syndicate. Voss considered this for a moment before speaking again. How do we initiate contact without putting ourselves at risk? Lyra thought carefully before answering. We could use a neutral location, somewhere away from both our factions where we can meet without hostility. She glanced at Tull and Voss earnestly. But it requires trust on both sides. Trust is hard to come by these days, Voss remarked dryly. True, Lyra acknowledged, but her eyes sparkled with determination. But if we don't try something different, we'll be fighting a losing battle against an enemy that won't back down. Tull shifted uncomfortably in his seat as he considered Lyra's words. He had seen firsthand how relentless humans could be when cornered. I'll reach out discreetly, Lyra continued, breaking his train of thought. I have contacts among human factions who might be willing to listen if approached carefully. Voss stood up abruptly, her resolve strengthening as she looked at Tull and Lyra with renewed purpose. Then let's do it. We'll gather what information we can and prepare for this meeting. As they discussed logistics and potential locations for contact, Tull couldn't shake off the feeling that they were stepping into uncharted territory, one where alliances could form or crumble based on trust alone. Hours later, the trio made their way through the darkened corridors of the colony toward a designated rendezvous point, a dilapidated warehouse near the outskirts where both humans and aliens had once traded goods before hostilities escalated. The atmosphere was tense as they approached the meeting spot. Voss led with determination while Tull trailed closely behind her, his mind racing with possibilities, and fears, about what lay ahead. As they entered the warehouse, shadows danced across walls littered with remnants of past lives, broken crates stacked haphazardly alongside rusted machinery long forgotten by time. Stay alert, Voss instructed quietly as she scanned the dimly lit space for any signs of life. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a young woman with dark hair pulled back tightly into a bun and sharp green eyes that gleamed with intelligence. You're late, she said coolly as she stepped forward confidently. Are you our contact? Voss asked cautiously. Yes, she replied without hesitation, crossing her arms defiantly over her chest as she regarded them both warily. I'm Commander Eloan Voss. Voss introduced herself formally while glancing at Tull beside her for support. And this is Lieutenant Yarrick Tull, she added quickly before continuing cautiously, we're here to discuss potential cooperation between our factions. The woman raised an eyebrow skeptically but didn't dismiss their request outright. Instead she studied them intently before responding. Cooperation? After everything your kind has done, she asked pointedly. We're aware of the history between us, Voss admitted honestly. But things are changing, our enemies are becoming more powerful than ever before. The woman's expression softened slightly as she considered Voss's words. There was a flicker of understanding in her eyes as she glanced around nervously before leaning closer. What do you propose? She asked cautiously. We believe there may be common ground between us, Tull interjected earnestly, now feeling emboldened by Voss's confidence beside him. He continued passionately, the Syndicate poses a threat not only to humans but also to us. They see all life outside their control as expendable. The woman regarded him thoughtfully before nodding slowly. It seemed like she was weighing their sincerity against years of mistrust built up between their species. If you want cooperation, she finally said after what felt like an eternity of silence hanging heavy in air around them, you need to prove it. How? Voss asked quickly, hope ignited within her chest at this unexpected opportunity for dialogue. By showing us you're willing to fight alongside us, not just against us. Tull felt his heart race at this proposition. It was risky but perhaps necessary if they were going to forge any meaningful alliance moving forward. Then let's fight together, he said resolutely, meeting her gaze head-on. Now filled with determination, He could feel adrenaline coursing through his veins as he realized how much was at stake here, not just for themselves but also for countless others who would suffer if the syndicate continued unchecked. The woman studied him closely again before extending her hand cautiously toward him, a gesture laden with significance that transcended words spoken aloud between two worlds long divided by fear and misunderstanding. "We'll see if your actions match your words." With that simple exchange, a handshake binding two disparate factions together, the path ahead began unfolding into something neither side could have anticipated, hope amidst uncertainty where once only animosity thrived. Part 4, The Turning Tide. General Cale Thorne stood in the war room of the Syndicate's flagship, a massive vessel orbiting a desolate planet. Holographic displays flickered to life around him, showcasing maps, troop movements, and reports from various operations across the galaxy. He was a man of imposing stature, with sharp features and a demeanor that commanded respect. Yet today, his brow was furrowed with concern. "Status report," he barked, his voice echoing off the metallic walls. An aide stepped forward, tapping on a console to bring up the latest data. "General, our latest mission to eliminate the human presence on Colony 7 has failed. We lost 3 operatives, and 1 human escaped." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "Failed? How is that possible? We've sent our best assassins to deal with these pests." "Sir, the reports indicate that the human was not only alive but actively engaged our operatives. They demonstrated unexpected tactical acumen and resilience," the aide explained hesitantly. Thorne slammed his fist against the table, causing the holograms to flicker. "This is unacceptable. We cannot allow humans to defy us like this. They are weak, insignificant. Yet they continue to survive against our efforts," another officer interjected. "Perhaps we need to reconsider our approach." "Reconsider?" Thorne shot back, incredulous. "We are the Syndicate. We do not reconsider, we eliminate." The tension in the room thickened as officers exchanged uncertain glances. Thorne's reputation for ruthlessness was well known, but this new information about humans had begun to sow seeds of doubt among his ranks. "General," a voice called from the back of the room. It was Commander Eloan Voss, flanked by Lieutenant Yarrick Tull and Dr. Lyra Cade. They had been granted an audience after their recent encounter with humans in Colony 7. "What do you want?" Thorne snapped, his irritation palpable. "We need to talk about our strategy regarding humans," Voss said firmly, stepping forward despite Thorne's hostile demeanor. "The Syndicate has underestimated them for too long." Thorne scoffed. "And you think you can teach me about strategy? You're just a commander of a small unit." "I'm here because I believe we can find a better way to handle this situation," Voss pressed on, undeterred by his dismissive tone. "We've seen firsthand how resilient they are, and how they fight back when cornered." Tull chimed in, "If we keep sending teams to eliminate them without understanding their tactics or motivations, we'll continue to lose operatives and resources." Dr. Cade added her voice to the discussion. "Humans are not just surviving, they are adapting and organizing against us. We need to change our tactics if we want any chance of success." Thorne regarded them with skepticism but felt a flicker of intrigue at their boldness. "And what do you propose?" "We need to gather intelligence, not just on individual humans but on their networks and alliances," Voss suggested. "If we can understand how they operate as a collective, we might find ways to disrupt their efforts without direct confrontation." "And what if they refuse to cooperate?" Thorne challenged. "Then we adapt," Tull replied confidently. "But if we keep treating them as mere targets, we'll push them further into desperation, and that will only make them more dangerous." A heavy silence fell over the room as Thorne considered their words. He had always prided himself on being decisive and ruthless, yet here were 3 individuals challenging him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about humanity. "Very well," Thorne finally said, his tone begrudgingly respectful but still laced with authority. "You have one chance to prove your worth in this matter. I will allow you access to our intelligence resources, but if you fail. We won't fail, Voss assured him firmly. Thorn nodded curtly before dismissing them with a wave of his hand. As Voss, Tull, and Cade exited the war room, they exchanged glances filled with determination. Meanwhile, back on Colony 7, Carthon and Dulles were recovering from their harrowing encounter with the human who had spared their lives. The two Syndicate operatives sat in their ship's cockpit as it hummed quietly in orbit above the desolate landscape below. What do you think will happen now? Dulles asked cautiously as he navigated through the ship's systems. I don't know, Carthon replied thoughtfully, staring out at the swirling clouds below them. But I have a feeling this isn't over yet. Dulles frowned as he adjusted their course toward the nearest Syndicate outpost. They'll send another team after us, after that human. Carthon nodded grimly. He could already envision how it would play out, another squad sent into danger without understanding what they were up against. They won't listen, Carthon said finally, frustration creeping into his voice. They never do, Dulles agreed bitterly. As they continued their journey back to report on their failed mission, Carthon couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling that something monumental was shifting in the galaxy, a tide turning against those who believed themselves invincible. Back in the Syndicate's war room, General Thorn convened another meeting with his officers after hearing Voss's proposal for gathering intelligence on human networks. Prepare an operation, he ordered brusquely as he surveyed his assembled commanders and strategists. We will infiltrate human territories and gather information on their alliances. One officer raised an eyebrow skeptically. And what if they catch us? Thorn leaned forward menacingly. Then we show them why they should fear us. The officers nodded reluctantly. There was no denying Thorn's reputation for ruthlessness, but there was also an undercurrent of fear among them now that humans were proving more formidable than expected. As plans were laid out for this new operation against humanity, a mission that would take them deeper into enemy territory than ever before, Thorn felt a thrill of anticipation course through him. It was time to remind everyone who truly held power in this galaxy. Meanwhile, Commander Voss and her team were busy preparing for their own mission, gathering intelligence on human factions across various planets while attempting to forge alliances that could help turn the tide against the Syndicate once and for all. We need to move quickly, she instructed Tull and Cade as they reviewed maps dotted with potential locations for contact with human groups willing to negotiate peace rather than conflict. We can't afford any mistakes, Tull added seriously as he studied their options carefully. Every decision mattered now more than ever before. As they planned their next steps, determined not only by survival but also by hope, they understood that this was no longer just about defeating the Syndicate. It was about redefining what it meant to be allies in an unforgiving universe where trust could be both weaponized and salvaged amidst chaos.